Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first episode of the 36 Lessons podcast, an Elder Scrolls lore podcast. I'm your host, Andrew, joined by...
Oh, damn it.
Joined by this guy.
Rory.
Rory, yeah. So this is an Elder Scrolls podcast.
It's the first episode of an Elder Scrolls podcast, which means we dearly hope you're hearing this, and that it's not something that me and Andrew are digging up on an external hard drive 5 years down the road.
Yeah.
Being like, hey, remember this?
and cringing horribly at it.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So this Elder Scrolls podcast, we're going to focus on the lore of Elder Scrolls. There's a lot of people, I think, who are even new to Elder Scrolls now, especially since Skyrim had its Switch release.
47th?
I'm sorry, what?
It recently had its 47th release on the Switch.
It's Switch release.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's up to quite a few now. So you'll naturally, I think, if you play the game, be interested in the universe surrounding it. But I think a lot of the resources right now, you're most likely to stumble across a lore discussion on the test lore subreddit or one of the other forums, and those are expert level discussions, so it can seem really intimidating.
Yeah, and it is intimidating.
It is, yeah. So I think we're hoping to demystify a bit of it for you, and I think that Elder Scrolls is a really good place to do that because, unlike some other universes, it has some really concrete answers to most of the basic questions.
Yeah, I think I pissed our friend Adam off yesterday because Adam started saying that he didn't think the Elder Scrolls had the best lore. He considered it just generic high fantasy.
I saw that, actually. I heard them talking about it on an episode of their program.
Yeah, and I said, I didn't mean to make him angry, but I said that anybody that thinks that, I don't think they've dug far enough into the lore, because it really stops being generic elves and orcs once you get a little further. Yeah, exactly. So
yeah, it does open up and expand, but I can see how if you're just looking at the basics, you might think that it's all standard fare Lord of the Rings-esque style lore. And by Lord of the Rings-esque, I don't actually mean Lord of the Rings. I mean things that are inspired by it, because Lord of the Rings itself has a really expansive, beautiful lore.
Exactly, yeah.
And we'll try to. I think you compared this to Cosmos almost. At least this first episode, we'll try to give you some macro ideas about the way the Elder Scrolls universe works. We're not going to get into too much detail right away.
Right. Broad strokes, like you said.
Yeah, exactly. Broad strokes. Yeah.
So let's... Okay, you go ahead, Rory.
Okay. I think we should start with Skyrim, because that's the setting that almost everyone is familiar with. It's where most people have actually played action game time in. So if you've played the game, you're probably familiar with the fact that Skyrim is a part of a larger collective of provinces known as Tamriel, which form a continent.
Right. And Tamriel itself is home to 9 provinces.
Mm-hmm.
Each one home to its... Not home to, but each one houses its own main race in the game.
Or, in the case of one of them, 2 races.
2 races, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the orcs have a tenuous 10th province called Lucidium,
that's true.
Right?
Yes, that's right.
That most people don't recognize as its own province, but there you go.
But for all intents and purposes, for the sake of the orcs, they certainly do.
Yeah.
And so the action of the games that you're familiar with take place on this province, but it's definitely not the only thing that's around. But there are 9 provinces. Each of them expansive, and not only do they have their own races, they have their own cultures, and you could certainly make multiple games about every single one of them if you were so inclined.
Absolutely. The provinces themselves, we spoke about Skyrim. There's also Cyrodiil, which Obsidian was based in.
Oblivion. Obsidian is a company.
Obsidian is a game company.
Yes.
Oblivion.
A very good one, but a distinct...
We've got Blackmarsh, home to the Argonians. Mm-hmm. We've got Elsewhere, home to the Khajiit. Hammerfell, home to the Redguard. High Rock, home to the Bretons. Morrowind, home to the Dark Elves, or Dunmer. Somerset Isles, I think that's your favorite, isn't it? Or is it Valenwood?
Mine is Valenwood, yes.
Somerset Isles, home to the Altmer. And Valenwood, home to the Bosmer.
Games. We've also had some. So Morrowind is obviously where Morrowind itself takes place. Broadly speaking, Morrowind, the game, the Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind, takes place in a subset of the province of Morrowind.
It takes place on the island of Vardenfell.
That's correct. Yes.
Which is the island in the big bowl, the ocean there.
That's right. Yeah, and it's actually there's actually a project I forget the name of it, which actually aims to recreate the rest of the province of Morrowind, and include that in the game. I forget what it's called. Tamriel Rebuilt.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, which is a very ambitious project by a few fans of the game, a few very dedicated and lore knowledgeable fans. And and the other games. So I haven't actually delved too deeply into the Elder Scrolls 1 and 2, and I'm guessing that most of the people listening to this haven't either, because if you were, you probably know most of this.
Well, I think most people listening to this podcast already know most of this anyway.
Yeah, well, that's also a good possibility. Yeah.
In future episodes, we'll dive deeper into all of these things.
Oh, certainly, yeah.
But for this first episode, we just want to keep it simple.
And what's interesting about, well, the province of Tamriel, like I say, even though it's where the actions of the game take place, the other, I said province of Tamriel, continent of Tamriel, the other continents here also have really rich and involved lore that's not at all secondary to the lore of Tamriel. It may be a little less fleshed out, but it's very connected to the action. The things you see going on in the game are related very heavily to those other places.
Absolutely. So what are the other continents here?
So the other continents are Akavir, which if you've played any Elder Scrolls game, Akavir is sort of brought up quite a bit.
Yeah. That's probably the most fleshed out continent outside of Tamriel.
I would say yes. You'll see references to it in a lot of the games, and we haven't delved really deeply into ESO, but it would make sense if you saw a lot of references to it in ESO, given the time period it takes place in.
Yeah.
There is Atmora, which is a very interesting continent, which was it's sort of some of these, they hit their stride, we'll say, in terms of their civilizations in different times, and Atmora is where the Nords sort of originally come from, I guess you could say.
Exactly.
Before, you encounter them, obviously, in for the players of the game, Skyrim seems like the home of the Nords, but historically the home of the Nords was Atmora.
That's where man, the race of man that we see in the games, come from, except for the Redguards, which come from another continent. But I think in the lore, man was forced to leave Atmora as it froze over. It became a frozen wasteland.
Yes, that's right. Yeah,
so they came to Tamriel.
Yes, exactly. They came to Tamriel, and you'll actually see some really direct connections to this if you played Skyrim and you've done the mage quest line. If you see Sarthal, for instance, I believe that was one of the first cities that was originally settled by the people of Atmora when they came over to Tamriel.
Right.
The other, there's of course the continent of Yakuta, which, as Andrew mentioned, that's the traditional home of the Red Guards, which actually sunk into the ocean.
Yeah, it's the reason the Red Guards came to Tamriel.
Yes, exactly. And it also, if you look at a map of Tamriel, or sorry, a map of these continents in general, it makes sense why the Red Guards settled in Hammerfell, because they're quite close to each other. Yakuta is actually on the western side of Tamriel.
Yeah, we should say Atmora is up north, Akavir is to the east.
East, that's right, yes.
Yakuta to the west.
Which brings us to the south, which is a province whose pronunciation...
I'm going to say Pyandonia?
I've heard Piondine, so I have no idea. I don't know at all how it's said.
We should pause and say that I think a lot of the pronunciations we're using are actually incorrect.
Oh, certainly. Yeah, we know this lore from reading it, not from, I've never heard Todd Howard say any of these words, right?
Yeah.
So, yes, but I think, however this pronounces, I'll say Piondine is probably one of the most interesting continents that never really gets dealt with.
Yeah,
in the direct action of the game.
It's home to the... Can you say this one?
The Maormer.
Maormer, yeah. We actually see a couple of those in ESO. At least one of them.
Yes, I think you're right, actually.
Yeah.
I'd kind of forgotten some of my ESO knowledge.
So they're sea elves.
Yes, they're the sea elves, and they're really interesting. They were originally from another place, but they were exiled. Which sort of, I guess, this would be a convenient place to at least mention this other theoretical continent of Aldmeris.
Right.
Which is where the Maormer were actually originally from before they were presumably exiled. And the reason I say this isn't really a technical continent is because there's a lot of debate on whether it actually exists.
Right.
The lore on that is, or at least my knowledge of it, is a little fluid. But for the sake of this, I think we'll consider Aldmeris to be an actual continent. And the home of the Mer. We'll use this term in Elder Scrolls Mer to refer broadly to the, I'll say, non-mortal races.
All right.
To the elves of the various kinds. So that's your Bosmer, your Wood Elves, your Dunmer, your Dark Elves, your Altmer, which are High Elves, your Maormer, which are the Sea Elves, and the two not really present races of the Dwemer and the Aelids. Is that how that's said?
Aelids, yeah.
So
don't forget the Orsimer.
Oh, the Orsimer, yes, which more commonly in the games are known as the Orcs.
Right.
So those are
the Chimer or the Chimer,
which became the Dunmer or the Dark Elves.
Yeah.
And so yeah, those are your races of Mer, which come from Aldmeris originally.
I've actually heard it pronounced Mare, like Mare. Yeah, it sounds weird, doesn't it? But I think Michael Kirkbride said, like one of the head writers on Morrowind, at least. That's how it was intended to be pronounced. So I don't know.
We'll just say it right now. If Michael Kirkbride says it's Mare, it's Mare. He can say whatever he wants. If he says it, I'm saying it. That's from now on, it's Mare as far as I'm concerned.
I said Michael Kirkbride said it, but I could have just read that somewhere. I was like,
sure, yeah.
Hey, that's Michael Kirkbride.
Yeah, we've just attributed it to him. Yes.
Yeah.
But he's the one of the be-all, end-all authorities as far as Elder Scrolls lore is concerned. And his work, even since being part of the... he used to, of course, as Andrew said, work in a formal capacity on Elder Scrolls lore, and now he works in almost more of like a fan capacity.
Yeah, yeah.
And he's the man.
I feel like he's the guy that Bethesda goes to when it's like, hey, we need something really cool for our games.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and these and
And
like
he
we
gives
said,
them something so outlandish and weird. Yeah.
and it works. It
Yeah.
always works. The like we said, the once you delve into the Elder Scrolls lore, it really becomes non-standard fantasy, and I'd say a good portion of that is thanks to him.
Absolutely.
And so we mentioned continents, which, like I said, they're very directly connected to Tamriel, considering, for the most part, they're where the people of Tamriel come from.
Yeah. Did you know that they were all actually all part of just one continent, one singular landmass?
I never knew that. Is that true?
Yeah. So they all is similar to Pangea.
Pangea,
Right.
yeah. That never even occurred to me, actually.
So way back at the beginning, they were all one landmass. Do you know what the Elno-Fae are?
Only in passing.
Right. So the Elno-Fae are the ancestors of both Mer and Man.
Mm-hmm.
So they were the first of those sentient beings to inhabit Nirn, the planet that Tamriel and all these other continents are on. They had a war. There was a war between the Elno-Fae that chose to stay where they started and the ones that decided to go off wandering. And the war actually caused the landmass to break apart. And that's why we have all these continents.
Oh, that's really cool, actually. Yeah, and it makes a certain amount of sense if you look at them physically. Like, they kind of look like some of them fit together.
Yeah.
That's very cool. And that's actually interesting because that premise in Elder Scrolls is a really common thing. People in conflict who decided to sort of go their separate ways. That kind of pops up again and again.
Exactly, yeah.
As you mentioned, yeah, so this is Nirn. Nirn is the planet on which all of this sort of thing takes place. We're getting a bit now into the cosmology of our world. And Nirn and the other planets and celestial things.
Celestial objects.
The celestial objects are all floating around. And it's tough to say actually what plane they're in because they are sort of varying in that way. But suffice to say that Nirn takes place on a plane of existence known as Mundus. That's where Nirn exists.
Right. It's the mundane realm.
Yes, exactly.
So Nirn is orbited by two moons, Masser and Secunda.
That's right, yeah.
In Mundus, we also have the other planets. See if you recognize some of these names. We've got Arche, Akatosh, Zenithir, Julianos. So all the Aedra. So the Aedra are the I forget the name. Sorry.
You forget the name for the Aedra?
Well, what?
The Divines.
The Divines.
Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. They're the. Well, we should say that the planets represent 8 of the Divines.
Right.
There's if you remember from Skyrim, certainly people who play Skyrim are familiar at least with the idea of Talos, who's considered by some to be the 9th divine. But he didn't get a planet. They don't give him a planet.
No. Well, he wasn't around for the creation.
No, he was not. No. These are the Aedra, and Aedra, I believe, is the word for ancestors.
Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's the genesis of that word. Is it's the it's probably the Altmer word for ancestors, or in whatever language was relevant when they named it. And
right, so the 8 Aedra were directly responsible for creation.
Yes,
and
they were.
That's why they get their planets, I suppose.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, they sacrificed enough And they even in the creation they do sacrifice some of their power.
Right.
They were recruited to make sacrifices of themselves and contribute to the creation of Mundus and by extension of Nirn.
Recruited or tricked?
That's it, which is a lore debate, actually.
Maybe we'll leave that one for another podcast.
Yeah, we could do a podcast on that, actually.
Yeah.
And even though it's probably not the next thing cosmologically, it's the next logical thing to at least mention, I think, what Daedra are, just because I feel, it's its own episode, certainly.
Yeah.
But the Daedra are those supremely powerful beings who did not contribute to creation. So, contrary to like the way sometimes in game it can appear like the Daedra are the bad guys and the Aedra are the good guys, it's really not that black and white. The Daedra are the people who just didn't feel like contributing, and as a result, they retained their full power.
Yeah,
and
that's like, why we see them have a more direct. Direct influence or relationship to the people in the games and the player.
Exactly. Yeah, and in all their various forms, because of course the Daedra themselves are their own rabbit hole of categorization and
right.
and things like that. So I wanted to mention that what the relationship there was.
So all those Aedra planets, they exist alongside of Nirn. Inside of Mundus, the mortal realm. The Daedra, since they didn't partake in the creation.
The Daedra.
Did I say Aedra?
Yes, I believe so.
Sorry. The Daedra, since they didn't participate in the creation, they exist outside of the mundane realm.
Yes.
In Oblivion.
That's right, yes. The which is a very, very cool plane of existence.
A very confusing plane of existence as well.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, it's and Oblivion in and of itself has subcategories known as the planes of Oblivion, of which the number in the tens of thousands.
Right.
Though there's the 16 famous ones. Occupied by their respective or ruled over by their respective Daedric princes.
But you've also got realms like the Soul Cairn.
Yes. Oh, yes. Yeah. Lots of other realms which are of their own in Oblivion.
Yeah. I originally thought Battlespire might be its own realm as well, but it actually exists in like a slipstream between Oblivion and Mundus, I think.
See, I didn't know that. Okay, yeah. That's interesting, actually. Yeah. So as you can see, as I think we said at the beginning of the podcast that this kind of stuff got very detailed and very non-standard very quickly, and I think this is a perfect evidence of it. Yeah,
it's a rabbit hole, man.
It really is. It really is a rabbit hole. But like I said, I really think it's interesting that even though it is a rabbit hole at the advanced levels, the beginner basic stuff is so clear, and that Absolutely. Puts it on a plane that's really different from other universes of lore. Like if you delve into like Buffyverse lore or even Metal Gear lore, mm-hmm. You're looking at some very basic questions that don't have any answer whatsoever.
Yeah, Elder Scrolls can totally be that high fantasy Lord of the Rings setting that if that's what you want. And yes. I think that's the beautiful part of Elder Scrolls, where it can get totally weird and metaphysical if that's what you're looking for, but it totally doesn't have to either. So
yeah, it's 100% what you make of it. Do we want to? Would you like me to? Should we go through the main planes of Oblivion that the people are familiar with, or would you like to save that for a?
I think we can go through them. We can touch on them. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Well, okay. The first one is Apocrypha, which is ruled over by the Daedric prince Hermaeus Mora, which our friend Adam, who we've mentioned earlier in the podcast, this is by far his favorite. I'd say it's one of his favorite details of the game, actually.
Well, it's because it's the most Lovecraftian.
That's exactly right, yeah. And we will be certainly doing an episode later specifically dealing with Daedra, where we'll talk about Apocrypha and its ruler, Hermaeus Mora, a little more.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's Ash Pit, which is ruled over by the Daedric Prince Malakath.
Malakath,
which is no one's favorite.
Oh, poor Malakath.
Yeah, really though. There's Boethia's realm, which doesn't actually, it's not named, unfortunately.
I've got Attribution's Share.
I think I've heard it called that. I didn't know if that was an official name. Is that an official name?
It might not be.
That's true. Attribution Share has been used. That might be the correct name of it. There's Clavicus Vile's realm, which is a really cool part of the game of Skyrim.
Clavicus Vile doesn't seem very creative.
The
everyone else has these really cool names for their realms. Yeah. It's just Clavicus Vile's realm,
which is interesting when you consider the sort of personality of Clavicus Vile.
It is, isn't it? Yeah.
You'd think he would have come up with something. There's Cold Harbor, which certainly all the gamers who are coming here from Elder Scrolls Online will be familiar with. Of course, it's ruled by Molag Bal, who is the primary antagonist of that of the single player adventure of Elder Scrolls Online. Voiced in that game by Malcolm McDowell, who's
I didn't know that.
Terrific acting talent, and obviously has a great voice, and he's done, he was, John Henry Eden in Fallout 3, and he does a brilliant job there as well. The Colored Rooms is ruled over by Meridia, and that's certainly Skyrim people will be familiar with that as well, because the Meridia's Beacon quest is, I think, actually quite memorable as far as Skyrim quests go.
Yeah, it's become a meme now. Another hand touches the beacon.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh man, I missed that. That's pretty good. So it's a little esoteric for a meme, but I'll take it. There's the Deadlands, ruled over by Mehrunes Dagon, and a lot of people are going to be familiar with that if they've played the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion.
Right.
Which is, for point of interest, which is my favorite entry in the series. I believe yours is Morrowind. Do I have that correct?
Morrowind, yeah. I bounce back and forth between Skyrim and Oblivion for second favorite.
Oh, okay, yeah. They both have things to their great credit.
Yeah, if you could take Skyrim and Oblivion and then squish them together into a real cool game, that'd be the best. But
that would be excellent, yeah. And maybe we'll get that. Who knows? When the Elder Scrolls 6 comes out in 100 years. There's Evergloam, which is ruled over by Nocturnal. Something people who are familiar with Thieves Guild lore will know quite well. It's worth noting these Daedric princes all have, qualities and occupations which they inspire, I guess you could say.
Right.
The Hunting Grounds, ruled over by Hircine. Moonshadow, ruled over by Azura. Who's present in one of the very first Skyrim quests I ever did. Azura Star.
Oh.
Yeah, I went straight for the College of Winterhold as soon as I got that game.
Yeah, that's fair.
It was the first thing I did. I was like, Riverwood, I hate this place. I'm going north. And as far as sort of treks you can make in these sort of games, the trek to the College of Winterhold is one of the safer ones.
Yeah.
To do at an early level, whereas if you try to go out west to visit the Forsworn, you will be swiftly killed. This is next is Sanguine's realm, the myriad realms of revelry.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, pretty much. Namira's realm is it's sort of obscure, but ruled over by the Daedric Prince Namira. The Pits, ruled over by Periite. Terrible name.
Pits? I've got the Scuttling Void for Namira's realm.
Yeah, I gotta
This
find out
is
some of these names.
yeah.
The Scuttling Void. Okay,
I brought it up
like
on. I'm not using the UESP right now, so
that. Okay,
that
yeah.
might be on me here. So don't take.
Right, yeah, there might be some non-canon names flying about.
Yeah,
Uh, the Shivering Isles, ruled over by Sheogorath.
of course.
Very cool. Cool in everything. It's encountered.
In my opinion, the best part of Oblivion, the game. I mean,
Oh, okay, yeah, the game. Yeah, certainly. If you've played any of the Elder Scrolls, you've probably been there, actually, because it appears in Oblivion, it appears in Skyrim, and it appears in the Elder Scrolls Online quite prominently.
yeah.
A very cool realm, very cool prince. I've never known how this was pronounced, so I'm going to say it's the Spiral Skein, ruled
Spiral
by
Skein. Yeah, I would
Yeah.
pronounce it like that.
and it's Mephala is the resident Daedric prince.
Right.
Then there's Quagmire, ruled over by Vaermina, and that's a really cool Daedra story there, actually. Daedric Prince of Nightmares. So that hopefully will give you some ideas of those are the 16 major planes of Oblivion. But like we say, there's tens of thousands of others, and they're all interesting. They have their own lore, and certainly the Daedric princes who occupy them have no shortage of lore for themselves. So I guess where does that leave us? We had discussed the planets and Oblivion.
So Oblivion and Mundus and everything inside of those all take place in something called the Aetherius.
Oh yes, yeah. This is where things get a little less detailed.
Yeah.
This is quite, this is, we're talking about the planets and even the other continents of Nirn, where, certain level of removal from the gameplay. And once you get into Aetherius, we're a very high level of removal from the gameplay. Suffice to say that some of the people who were around when Nirn was created didn't like it that much. And they all took off to Aetherius. And when they did that, they didn't shut the door behind them, and that's why we have stars and the sun. It's the light coming in from Aetherius. And outside of that, and in between, and all sorts of things, we have something called the Void, which you'll hear a lot of references to in game. Because of course it's heavily referenced in the Dark Brotherhood quest line.
Right. Yeah. This is where you'll find Sithis.
That's right. Yes, and arguably, depending upon your in-game religion, also a lot of other people, or at least their souls.
Right.
The Void it's basically the absence, and it was before all of this other stuff, there was the Void, and all of this other stuff was created, I guess you could say, inside of it.
Yeah.
Even though you can't, there's sort of a kind of bizarre cosmological thing, of course, of the idea of being inside the total vacuum of matter.
It's hard to describe what a lot of the stuff is, because there's so little information available on it. A lot of it comes from fan speculation or just references in passing.
Exactly, yeah. So. The idea of canon in the Elder Scrolls universe can be a little muddled.
Well, Elder Scrolls itself utilizes the unreliable narrator more than I think any other series I've experienced.
Definitely.
It's just full of conflicting information. That makes sense in this world. It's not conflicting in the sense that, we're retconning things. It's conflicting in the sense that, different people in this universe have different ideas. It's like real life.
Exactly. It's not a mistake as such.
Right.
Like a continuity. It's not a continuity error. It's a continuity contradiction, but that's very intentional. So the books you read, like it's actually quite clever. So the books you read in game, which you find all over the damn place, are, those have authors, and those authors wrote those books subject to their own interpretations and their own religious ideas. And that's why you'll see varying references to the 8 divines or to the 9 divines. And the games actually deal fairly directly with the conflicting religious practices that occur. There's plenty of references to the, I guess, how would you say, sacrilege by some people's perspective of things like Daedra worship.
Right. Yeah.
Which is very cool. Basically, if there's a powerful being in this game, someone worships it, and someone else is mad about it. So you'll see, that's why the different people have different gods. And like we said, we listed, some 16 realms of Oblivion, which account for 16 of the 17 Daedric princes. And so, for each of those Daedric princes will have their own dedicated followers, which you'll encounter lots of times throughout the action of the Skyrim and the other games.
Yeah.
A very memorable interaction I recall in one of my early playthroughs of Oblivion was running into a followers of one Daedric Lord, or Daedric Prince, sorry, who rejected me offhand because I was because they said, you're too beautiful. This is the Daedric Prince of ugliness and disgust. And of course, the great irony being, no one's character in Oblivion is beautiful. I was prime material for the Daedric Prince of ugliness and disgust.
Yeah. Which prince had the quest where you had to go into their realm and fight a bunch of their champions? Was that Periite? I can't remember.
I don't remember either.
I think it's the one. No, I don't think it is Periite. Periite is the one with all the frozen followers that you go in and save their souls from his realm.
And I wonder if we could do like a process of elimination here.
It's not Azura.
It's not. We know it's not Azura. Yeah, and it's certainly not Molag Bal.
People are screaming at us.
Yeah, no, yeah, everybody's mad. And it's not Nocturnal.
No.
And it's not Vermina. And it's not Sheogorath.
I don't think it's Hircine.
No, it's not Hircine, that's right. And it's certainly not Mehrunes Dagon.
No.
Man.
Who's left?
Yeah, who's left? It's like that's like 10 people we eliminated. Crazy. Yeah, I don't know. It's a shame I don't know, because the Daedric quests, in my opinion, are one of the best parts of the games.
Absolutely. In all of them, they're all memorable. Maybe not equally memorable, but they're all very unique quests.
I think they stand out in Skyrim as being, in my opinion, just leaps and bounds ahead of the other quest lines.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I think Skyrim suffers from kind of boring quests a lot of the time.
For a lot of the time, certainly. Well, I mean, what I think Skyrim mostly suffers from is a really lackluster main quest line.
Yeah. Great concept for a quest line.
Yes, I agree 100%. Yeah. If Adam were here, he'd tell us that. What's his name? What's the World Eater?
Alduin?
Alduin. He would tell us that Alduin is too small, and doesn't intimidate with his presence the way you would think something like the World Eater or World Destroyer or whatever they call him.
The World Eater.
Should. Yeah. But the Daedra quests in Skyrim are so interesting and so different, and they really give good insights. They tell you a lot of things about the Daedric princes without actually telling them to you.
Yeah, there's so much personality in each one of those quests.
Exactly, yeah. And the thing I mentioned earlier about the Daedra not being really evil, like that's like a misconception, is really clearly expressed. Like you can't finish Azura's star and think Azura is evil.
Yeah.
And Meridia too is also, you know, depending upon your values in the game, might consider to be an agent of good in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I mean, consider walking by an ant's nest. Are you evil if you step on a few ants?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's that's a really good example. Yeah, the only real being who's flat out evil is arguably Molag Bal.
Yeah.
Who I would say is one of the less interesting Daedra.
Yeah, I mean, if you Molag Bal would be if you start raping those ants.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Quite literally, that would be what it would be. Just flat out evil.
Yeah.
But also the eviler princes like Molag Bal and Marin's Dagon make convenient antagonists.
Yes, they do. Yeah.
So that's and certainly that is the place they've occupied historically in these games. But yeah, Daedric side quests are very interesting, and we'll also be talking about throughout the action of this podcast in the future. I'd say we'll be talking about the various guilds that you'll see, and hopefully a little more depth than you'll encounter them in the game, because they're a really important part of the history of all of these games as well.
Absolutely.
And also, I think they've given us in the various games some of the most interesting quest lines you'll encounter throughout the run of the game. I'll never forget playing an early playthrough of Morrowind and encountering the Morag Tong, which is sort of became my vehicle for my first explorations of the game of Morrowind.
Yeah.
And likewise, as you know, I'm a very big fan of the Dark Brotherhood and their quest line in the Elder Scrolls 4.
Mm-hmm.
I seem to err towards guilds like that. I'm not sure what that says about me as a player or a person. But
well, it says you like good quests.
Yeah, exactly. That's what we'll say. Yeah, it says I like good quests. Yeah. So hopefully we've demystified some of the universe here.
We've gone over it in we've given a good overview, I think.
Exactly, yeah. And so in the future, like we said, we haven't put too much planning into this yet, and the places it will take us. But there's a lot of things we hope to touch on that will expand on things we've brushed by today. Certainly, like I say, the Daedra and the guilds will occupy their own respective episodes.
Mm-hmm.
There's just so much content there. It's ridiculous. And I think we should also I want to give a shout out to like the ways we've learned about Elder Scrolls lore, because I think they're important. If you want to learn about Elder Scrolls lore, you know, whether there's specific questions you've had based on what we've done, or whether you're just extremely impatient and don't want us to wait for us to release another episode, there's lots of ways you can do this. I would say the quintessential way to learn about Elder Scrolls lore is through the UESP, the unofficial Elder Scrolls pages.
Mm-hmm.
That's
the best Elder Scrolls wiki available.
Without
a doubt.
I think that's accurate. I remember I have a friend who says that looking up things on the official Elder Scrolls wiki is actually a sign of weakness. If you're more for the video-based content rather than the reading content, then there's always the Shoddycast Elder Scrolls episodes.
Mm-hmm.
Which are very digestible, and they take great pains to make sure it's not presented in an intimidating way. It's presented in individual videos, and they break down a lot of things you might be interested in. And I'm not sure if you're familiar, Andrew, with the YouTube channel Imperial Knowledge.
No, I'm not.
Very good. And Imperial Knowledge, the person who is the proprietor of that channel, has individual episodes on like Akavir and Yakuta. The research on that channel is second to none as far as YouTube goes.
And even though I said it's intimidating at the top of the show, you definitely want to check out r/testlore.
Yes, yeah. Brilliant subreddit.
The lore masters there inspired me to create this podcast. Just the amount of knowledge that those guys possess is insane.
It's so impressive that now, mind you, if you just sort of go to the page, you might be sort of quite quickly taken aback.
Oh yeah,
by a list of questions in which you understand none of the words. But there are people there who will help you out, and there are resources there that will help you out if you're an aspiring lore buff and you want to get started on your own. If you really want to make that journey yourself, there will be help there. And if you're, advanced, then you definitely already know about it and you post there regularly. Yeah, so very, very good stuff. And thanks to all those people who certainly helped me learn. I'm not sure, Andrew, how long have you been involved in Elder Scrolls lore yourself?
Years, man. Years.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been involved for quite a while myself. And it's a slow going learning process.
Yeah. Sometimes it gets overwhelming and you're just like, I need some space.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's the type of thing that keeps pulling you back because it's so rich.
It's probably the richest. This is probably a bold statement, but it's probably the richest video game lore that didn't come from something else, like excluding like a Shadowrun game, because that comes from Shadowrun, which is a thing that already exists. In terms of like original video game lore, it's definitely one of the richest out there. And lore is one of those things when you're getting involved with it. It's not like everybody when they're first getting involved in science, they're taught beginner science and they go up through, the grades or the books or whatever they're doing to learn science. Lore is one of those things, if you stumble across it, it's likely to be a conversation between two people who know immense amounts and you're just so confused. So that's one of the reasons why we do this, is because it's we try to make the beginning stages, we try to make your lore kindergarten a little more friendly to you.
Yeah.
So is there anything else in the podcast that you wanted to touch on?
No, I think we covered everything that I wanted to cover this first episode.
Yeah, me too. And so we'll be back with another episode probably pretty soon. I'm not sure what our schedule is precisely for doing this. Like I say, this was our first run of this.
Yeah, I was thinking at least once a month. It could be more than that. It could be less than that. It could just be whenever we get around to it, because we both have busy lives.
That's true. Yes. We're both not doing this. We haven't quit our jobs and thrown our whole lives into this Elder Scrolls lore podcast. So our release schedule was, to a certain extent, depend on that. But we hope to be back kind of regularly with you guys, discussing some interesting stuff, because this is fun for us too.
Any comments or corrections or questions, please leave where you can.
Yeah, if we messed up, let us know, because we're, like I said, we're students of this just as much as anyone else is. So so we're all learning all the time. So help us learn if you can.
Well, thank you everybody for joining us on this episode.
Thank you. And we'll be back. We hope to see you soon.
Yeah. Goodbye.
Goodbye.